Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Pixelists Podcast, the podcast about all the nerdy things we love and enjoy. As always, we're your hosts. I'm Will. That's Blake. And you know what? We got a really kind of special episode here, I feel like, today, because we're going to be talking about Loki Season 2, Episode 1. And it's special because Loki Season 1, Episode 1 was the birth of this channel.
So, it was the OG.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool to be back for season 2.
Yeah, we emerged from the digital media canal into the world of YouTubing.
Yeah.
And back to our roots, literally.
Yeah. And it's cool because, back then I think I don't know, I haven't looked at it in a long time. Plus it's probably gotten just a few views over the eons. But when we first put that out, I think we maybe got like 5 views.
Yeah.
And 0 subs, obviously.
One was me, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. The other was me. The other was probably my mom.
Yeah.
But, now for season 2, episode 1, we're not there yet. I haven't checked today, but I don't think we're there yet. Almost 10K subs.
We're close.
So
we're right on the cusp.
Yeah. So just a cool little moment for us.
Yeah.
But
yeah. My goal is not to add anything of value, but just,
Well, thanks for checking in. That's going to be it. But no. So we haven't talked Marvel stuff in a while, actually. And again, that was the inception of this channel. Not that it was only going to be limited to Marvel back then, but
yeah, it's funny. We probably need to do like a 10K subs, like retrospective, but originally the channel, I mean, we still say it, Pixelists Podcast, all the nerdy things we love and enjoy. And we used to have a little bit more of an extended intro where we'd say shows, movies, games, D&D, and it's pretty much just D&D now, which is fine. But we used to do a lot of Marvel stuff, a lot of Marvel content. I would say the Marvel content has gotten less interesting over the year. That's part of the reason why.
Yeah. That's fair. I don't know if it'll be like its own episode, but at some point we need to I don't want to distract from Loki today, but have a longer conversation about phase 5 or 4 on the whole.
But we're in phase 5 now, right?
Right. Because I want to say Black Panther was the end of phase 4.
Right.
And phase 4 did have some highlights. So don't get me wrong. Some stuff was good. Loki being the pinnacle of that, in my opinion. Loki, WandaVision.
Right.
And I don't want to get into it. The other stuff as well. But yeah, I think that is a big part of it, is that at least for Blake and I, a lot of it has been disappointing. And as somebody who's literally kept up with every piece of Marvel for since Iron Man, basically, for the first time, there's stuff I haven't seen just because I've been well, meh, so I'll probably get to it eventually, but yeah.
I had seen everything except for Thor 2 Dark World. Never saw that. And I think that was the only thing I didn't see up until, I guess, about 2 summers ago. After Loki, they started putting out more shows on Disney Plus, and that's when I kind of fell off, I guess. But anyway, neither here nor there.
Yeah, but not to go on a down Marvel note before we start here, but to lift things back up, like I just said, season 1 of Loki might be one of my favorite, not just of phase 4, but of all time Marvel properties,
my wife and I,
projects.
When we watched it, we were just kind of talking about before it started, and I was like, you know what? I think this might be my favorite piece of content. WandaVision was up there, but I didn't like how WandaVision ended, which is another conversation. I was like, I feel like Loki is this for sure. So I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah.
We should do a channel together.
Yeah, we should. But really good. So I had very high expectations coming into season 2, which were kind of at war with the overall Marvel expectations that I've had recently. So, which I guess we're kind of getting into this. Is there anything we needed to say before we fully launch into things? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was I still wanted it and hoped it was going to be great because of how much I enjoyed season 1. But part of me was kind of oh, are they going to
right.
Can they get that again? And as far as episode 1, like, I really enjoyed it. It was right back there for me, like, with season 1, how, like, the quality and how, like, it how it made me feel. Um, but I really enjoyed it. What about you? Just, your brief review.
Yeah, I didn't have any expectations. In fact, mine were probably pretty low, and this just for Marvel in general. And my wife and I turned it off. We watched it and turned off the TV, and we were just like, "That was really good.
Yes.
That was really nice." So yeah, with zero expectations, I thought it was awesome. It really took me back to how good Loki season 1 was. Um, and yeah, we got a lot to talk about today. The
Yeah.
episode was very good. Is this going to be 6 episodes again?
I was gonna ask you the same thing because I could have just easily Googled it, but I was like, I'll just ask Blake if he knows.
I'll check into it right now. But yeah,
Well,
very Loki esque, and it was a very good season premiere. I felt like.
agreed. Yeah, I thought it was a really good premiere episode. And while you're looking that up, I'm going to give the briefest of recaps. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you watched the episodes, you probably don't need it. Um, but we pick back up with Loki, who is now, as we find out, time slipping. And he is just randomly getting essentially teleported through time throughout this episode. Interestingly, into the past and the future of the TVA, something in season 1 we were taught was impossible. So this episode kind of deals with that and him meeting up with Mobius and the two of them trying to solve this time slipping issue of his. Um, in pursuing this, we meet Ouroboros, aka OB, new amazing character this season. I don't want to butcher the pronunciation here, so forgive me if I do. But played by Ki Hui Kwan, I believe, of the Goonies and Indiana Jones fame. So with his
Okay,
help, they are able.
I was like, this guy is so familiar, but I
Yeah,
couldn't place it.
yeah.
Okay, that's really funny.
Also in Everything Everywhere All at Once, for those of you that saw that.
I didn't see it, but I knew he was in that.
Really
Okay,
good. You
cool.
need to. But so with his help, they come up with this plan, come up with this device to extract Loki from the time stream and kind of get this time slipping under control. And that's basically what the episode revolves around and ultimately successfully completes, with a little bit of a cliffhanger with Loki seeing Sylvie in one of these time slipped futures he appears in very briefly before getting ripped out and rescued from this time slipping phenomenon. And then we get a little bit of a end teaser scene of Sylvie in a 1980s McDonald's in Oklahoma, I believe.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was a very simple explanation of what happened. We're obviously about to dive in way deeper now. But yeah, I I have a lot of like random, probably like Pepe
Yeah,
Silva type like things I wrote
yeah.
down, so I don't really know like where to start
Let's
necessarily.
let's start with just things we appreciated, and then we can move into theories, thoughts,
Okay.
speculation. I know for me, I loved the humor in it.
Yes.
I really enjoyed Thor, but I feel like people who didn't like Thor would have enjoyed this kind of more dialed back, less zany humor. I was actually thinking about you as I was watching it. I was thinking like, I wonder if Will would have enjoyed this more. But it was like such the right amount of levity, and
Yeah.
the acting was so freaking good. Like I loved the as he's time slipping back to Obi in the past, and they're having this conversation, and it was smart too, like in the sense of like it, there's always like discussions in media about like how do you do like time and things like that, and I thought they approached it well enough where it was like I feel satisfied with this rather than it
Hmm.
being like a conundrum, I guess.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you're always kind of opening Pandora's box whenever you just introduce
right.
time travel, but they basically did that in season 1. Like all
Mhm.
these kind of same things were explored there, so like I feel like they kind of already had the base set. But yeah, I agree. I think they did it well. It was, some parts are meant to be, I don't know if confusing is the right word, but you're not supposed to have the full picture.
Right.
And so I think they did it very well where like things made sense within their own rules for what we know.
Mhm.
Um which that sounds kind of simple to put it that way, but a lot of things don't get that right. So,
Mhm.
uh yeah, I loved the humor as well. I thought, I mean, Owen Wilson is a legend,
It's
you
great.
know.
Yeah.
So I think he adds a lot to it with his timing. And Tom Hiddleston was great as well. And there were just a few like quick gags that were so fun, like the elevator scene where it's the second time he time slips, and the first time he told him like it's not that bad, and then this
Yeah.
time he's like, I can't deal with it anymore, man. Like
Yeah.
it's awful. And then the
He's like,
camera
this thing wasn't
pans and
bad.
there's
Yeah.
someone else in the elevator.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was really great humor. And uh Boros was just an awesome actor.
Yes.
Just it was so good. His
Stole the show,
deadpan
really.
delivery. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Such a good character. And a visually, like, the cinematography was great too. Like the image of the threads, like all the branching threads being like trying to be forced into like a single twine,
Yeah, yeah.
like just the in like that clog, for lack of a better
Yeah,
phrase.
the loom, I think,
Yeah.
something like
Yeah,
that.
that was really cool too.
Agreed. Yeah, and I loved the I know they did a lot of Loki on practical sets. Which obviously there's CGI and green screen stuff. Like of course there is, but you know, a lot of properties these days are going full like not practical set really at all. Like you know the have you seen like the big screen they use for Mandalorian? That's like the
Yes.
entire set is the screen.
Yeah, it's like a massive, like 20-foot. Yeah.
Yeah, and no shade at Mandalorian. I actually like Mandalorian a lot, but I love that there's a lot of like real physical sets here, and I feel like you can tell, and I feel like it adds to it. Um, but one final thing I wanted to mention, which is something we goozed all about during season one, was the score. Natalie Holt, who scored season one, she's back for this season. Just incredible. It brought me right back. Just those same like kind of little themes that were slipping in.
The theme song is very good. And like when the credits hit, dude, you're just like,
Yes.
oh, it's so good.
Speaking of the credits, which I probably should have done this before we sat down. I haven't had a chance to, but since they're credits, we'll be able to talk about this all season. I bet there's a lot of like I want to like really dive into like what's being shown there.
Right.
Because there was a lot of post-it notes
Mhm.
with stuff scribbled on it. So I'm really interested to see maybe what kind of little clues or Easter eggs might be there.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about, this is pretty typical us, but I've been thinking about doing like 10 things you missed in the season 2 premiere.
Yeah.
'Cause they had a lot of like really cool, like little details that I really liked. But I didn't think about, my wife and I were chatting when the credit screen was up, so I wasn't actually paying attention to it. But a lot of shows have nice little Easter eggs, and like another show, Only Murders in the Building, they always have like a really cool detail in the intro credits that like has something to do with the episode you're about to watch.
I
You
haven't
would
seen
know
that, but
that
I've heard it's really good.
it's really good. Season 1 was really good. Season 2 wasn't that good, but now
Oh
season
no.
3 has been really good, and they've joked about season 1 being better, which is kind of funny.
Okay, nice.
So anyway, but you want to talk speculations?
Yeah,
Or do you have more you
so
want to say about what you liked?
no, I'm good to move on. I like I said, I kind of have like a mishmash of stuff, and a lot of it like kind of goes together for like a.
Mhm.
Anyway, I guess I'll just kind of start. Feel free to stop
Yeah.
me or interrupt me or. So the thing that the most interesting kind of, I guess, mystery is not the right word, but the kind of key element of this first episode was the time slipping and the revelation that we were told the TVA was outside of time, or at least time worked differently in season one. But from what we saw in this episode, that seems to be untrue.
Mm,
Time like does exist here because Loki was traveling to the past and the present, or and the
mm,
future. And so at the end of season one, the little cliffhanger we got was Loki getting kicked through the portal and being in the TVA, running up to Mobius and
mhm.
B-15, who were freaking out about all the branching timelines, being like, what are we going to do? And Loki's like,
Right.
and they don't recognize him.
Right.
And so at the end of that, like the belief is that like, okay, what, like, we didn't think he was in the past. At least I didn't. I don't think most people thought that. They thought it was like,
Yeah, another TVA.
yeah, another TVA, or like,
Right.
history had changed because of the changes that they made. But so now we know that that was the past. Um, so one, the TVA is not outside of time. And two, something that was interesting to me is that what Mobius and B-15 were freaking out about was not what's happening because Sylvie killed Kang, because this was in the past. So there was some
Right.
other incident in the past that similarly caused things to go crazy.
Mhm.
Um, and we know that in the past, Kang was not hiding behind the veil of timekeepers. He was just
Right.
out in the open. Um, so I'm wondering if whatever event that was freaking out in the past is maybe related to why Kang decided to step behind the curtain and, start using the timekeepers instead. I also think it's interesting, or not interesting, but I thought these are all really cool details that, later in the episode, we meet OB, who remembers Morbius, but then it's kind of like played off as a joke that Morbius is like, yeah, but he doesn't really remember. Um, Implying that, at some point between those 2 points, Mobius had his memory wiped, which we know he has because he also doesn't remember meeting Loki in the past, which he
Mhm.
should have because OB remembers talking to Loki as soon as it happens. So you would
Right.
think Mobius was like, "Oh yeah, I did meet you 80
Mhm.
years ago." So again, that puts the memory wipe even further. Like we can
Mhm.
start kind of placing where this memory wipe happened. Um, so some crazy event happened in the past, back when Kang was the leader. Things changed. He wiped everyone's memory of it. And then it was the timekeeper thing. And I think the lie the TVA agents are told is that time works differently here. Because in
Mhm.
season 1, Mobius is like, Loki asked him how long he's worked there, and he's like, I don't know. Time works
Yeah.
differently here.
Yeah.
Um, and
Well,
one like
go ahead.
last kind of piece here is the most interesting thing for this to me is the fact that OB does remember. And so for
Mhm.
some reason his memory has not been wiped. And for some reason he is being kept away from everyone. Um it feel very intentionally feels like. He
Mm.
says Mobius is the last person he saw, and that
Yeah.
was 400 years ago or whatever. And
And he
yeah.
saw him by mistake. He got off on the wrong floor
Right,
by
yeah.
accident.
Yeah.
Um, so and like wasn't the when they got into the second elevator, didn't he like press a button with like his shoe? It was like the bottom button,
Yeah,
like on the
yeah.
bottom of the like you wouldn't even think about it, I guess.
It felt very like it felt very muscle memory to me. Like Mobius, because when he first walks into the room, he's like, I don't remember the last time I've been here. But then he walks in, he's like, I don't think I've ever been here. Um,
Yeah.
so it felt like, so how did he know how to get there? And to me, it's like he had been there before, probably, but his memory was wiped since then. And so,
Mhm.
like, he doesn't think he's ever been there, but I feel like he had the muscle memory of how to get there because in actuality, he had been there.
Right.
I don't know if that's a stretch, but yeah, it's because
No,
like the
yeah.
whole foot pressing the button thing it was like, it could have just been like a little bit of flair, but it felt like something that like you would have been like, you just would have learned to do instead of bending
Yeah.
over to press the bottom. It's just, oh, I'll just hit it with my foot. So it felt like a
Yeah.
muscle memory to me.
Yeah. And there's a lot to unpack from everything you just shared. I think it is interesting that Obi doesn't have his memory wiped. I guess he could have been put there intentionally. And I don't think these things exclude each other, by the way. But my presumption is he's in some, sub 30 floor basement, like tucked away place that he essentially was forgotten about
Hmm.
in the sense of, it's like, oh yeah, we had that. I forgot we had that guy. I forgot he works here. It hasn't had a visitor in 400 years. I mean, and we know that we presume it's not like a very select group of people who have their memory wiped. We presume it's probably
Like everyone.
the entire town of the TVA, which it's a
Hmm.
whole city, right?
Hmm.
So, which now I'm kind of remarking, it's kind of interesting. We never see anybody like sleep or like not work, but um, I assume Obi was just forgotten, is why his memory wasn't wiped. Um,
I think
it's
that's
interesting.
what they want you to think. but I think it was
Okay.
very intentional because one, he's like a genius. And it's
Hmm.
kind of a throwaway line, but they're going over the book, and he's like
And he wrote
explaining
it.
that,
That's
and he
right.
wrote it. He says the book
Yes.
explains everything about everything here, and
Yes.
I wrote it. And he's the one that knows how to get Loki at, like, he makes the machine himself. He's the one that even knew to make the machine. Um,
Yeah.
and it just seems like he's definitely being played off like as the guy from Office Space, that everyone just forgets about, and
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
like that guy kind of, which I think is kind of like the bit and stuff. But I think in actuality, like that's all by design by Kang
Mhm.
or whoever, Kang, I
Yeah.
guess. But why is really interesting, because there's
Right.
one comment also, and I don't remember the exact context of it, but LB is like talking about what he does and how, like, he gets little pneumatic tubes that get sent down, which by design, I would imagine, so that people don't have to interact with him because Kang and whoever doesn't
Mhm.
want them to. Um, but he says that, yeah, like he says Miss Minutes took care of everything. So all I have to do is run
Mhm.
maintenance every 200 years. So, like, to me,
Mhm.
it's like, okay, they set it up so that no one ever has to interact with him, and he's constantly staying down here with busy work, and he only has to check the mechanics every 200 years or whatever.
Mhm.
But the fact that he wrote that book, I think, is very interesting and makes it like he's vastly more important than we're being led to believe. And also his name, Ouroboros, which is also the
Yeah.
name of the episode.
Isn't it? And isn't it like a Greek mythology or something?
Yeah,
Like
it's
a
the never-ending snake, that, like, the snake that's eating its own tail, the, like, infinite
yeah. Okay.
circle. Which, so Ouroboros has no beginning or end, kind of like time. So I just feel like that's with the themes of the show and the fact that time travel and stuff is all involved, like that character being named that and being like the genius that runs everything
Mm.
here. I wonder if, like, I don't know how, like, they got him to agree to it. Like, maybe that's just the type of character he is and he's like just happy to help type of thing, or if they're like something going on where maybe he doesn't have his full faculties or something. But, like, I'm wondering if, like, that if he is like god tier, like cosmic level tier, if like Kang fears him and like is like,
Yeah.
I can only do this with you. Like, I couldn't set this up. Like, because at the end of the day, he's just a human that like figured out how to control time, and he's a genius, of course. But like, maybe Ouroboros was like necessary for all of this to go off, and they're like, okay, so I can't wipe his memory because he's integral to all this, but let's shove him in the
Or
basement and have
or
everyone
or
forget about him.
maybe like the mechanism of wiping said memory doesn't work on him. If he is like a
Oh,
cosmic
yeah,
level, maybe it's like, okay, I can't do this to him.
right.
So, hey,
Yeah, it could
your
be something like that.
job is going to be down here, and I'll see you in the next millennia. Yeah, and it also is very interesting too. You've mentioned Kang a few times in the sense of like maybe Kang did this or did that. We don't necessarily know it's the same Kang, by the way.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
like that past event of like the timelines branching, for all we know, like the Kang who ran the TVA there was much more showy, and here's my statue. And then maybe the Kang who ended up winning, the one who remains, was like, hey, I prefer, to not be in the limelight. And
True.
um, which is interesting considering the version they meet at the end of time is also, I mean, in some ways there's some hubris there, but also like doesn't identify himself as Kang. He's like, yeah, I'm the one who remains. It's like there's clout there, but it's also kind of like a more humble. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So it could be that there was a Kang that put him down there, and then now there's a different Kang that's like, I don't know what to do with this guy. Like,
Yeah. It doesn't even know.
I'm just gonna leave him alone. And then what's also really interesting too. It's interesting that with the timelines, or just like let's just say Earth, for example, there's all these different versions of Earth. When an
Right.
event happens, it branches out. You have all these branching timelines. It's interesting that the TVA does not seem that to
Yeah.
be true.
Yeah.
Like, because it's funny how what they've done with the show is they've taken the two very common demonstrations of how time travel works in media. We have Exhibit A, which is, this leads to all these different sprawling possibilities. And then you have, what happened the lost, what happened happened. Like you
Yeah.
can't change it. Time is immutable. I mean, it's, whatever. What's supposed to happen will happen. It's like the one timeline. And I think in season 1, it was like, okay, we're playing over here. Well, now what's kind of fun is we're getting some of this. It's like the
Yeah.
TVA. We assumed it was branching, like that was a different timeline with Kang's the statue, and it's like
Right.
no, it's all on a
Yeah.
single thread here, and then Loki was then in the future, and then in the present time. So it's just, I just really appreciate the creativity of, they're like, okay, we're going to do it this way for the
Yeah.
TVA.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that, but you're totally right. It's kind of like, I don't mean this phrasing, but like at the TVA is like the sacred timeline almost, because it is
Yeah, right.
not that it's not unchanged, not that it's unchanged or not unchanging, but yeah, because normally we're used to branch realities when changes happen, but there
Mm-hmm.
stuff just alters to make it make sense.
Right. Which a neat little detail in the future, Loki's looking for the what's it called, the stick,
Yeah, yeah. I
uh,
don't remember like the name of it, but
the
yeah.
disintegration stick. Can't find one because in the present, what's her face? They raided the armory and they took
Mm,
everything with them to, I guess, chase after Sylvie plus whatever her other ulterior motive is.
I didn't even think
So
about that.
here he is in the future, desperately trying to find one, can't find one because they took all of them.
Yeah.
They raided the armory basically. So a nice little,
Yeah, I didn't even
little
think
detail
about that.
there. Yeah,
That's really cool. How far did I don't want to get us too off base, but how far in the future do you think that was?
I don't
Like,
know.
do you think it was just like really quick, like, because I guess the thing that is kind of making it need to be sooner rather than later is like the chaos of what Sylvie did is like what's causing things to happen, and that seemed to still
Right.
be going on in that future site. So unless it was like real far in the future where something else entirely had caused another catastrophe, which doesn't seem likely,
Mm.
then it probably wasn't like too crazy far in the future. Um, I want to talk more about that scene. But
With
before we,
Sylvie.
yeah, but before we do, one last thing, or not one last thing, but one other thing on the whole time travel thing is, you brought up Lost, where one, this reminded me a lot of Lost, just in general,
Hmm.
specifically Desmond and the was it season 2 when that happened, that first
With his vision.
with it was it was one of the premieres of the show, where the show, and not to get super deep into Lost for those of you that aren't familiar with it, but they play with flashbacks
Hmm.
and stuff. And so the one of the premieres, and I think it's season 2, starts with what you assume to be a flashback, because there's like old technology, like old music playing, but then it's revealed that it's actually the present and it's Desmond in the hatch.
It's the finale of season 2.
The finale of season 2. Okay.
Yeah.
It reminded me of that a lot, just because we have these weird time travel things going on,
Yeah.
and spoiler, Desmond kind of deals with time travel. But two, just like the era, the technology of like the TVA is very reminiscent of like that hatch era
Yeah.
technology. Okay, I got off on a tangent, but you mentioned like in Lost, what happens happened, um, which I think is a very fair comparison to the type of time travel we're seeing at the TVA. But, and unless this was like an oversight or something they didn't plan out, the TV falling and cracking the ground, which then later serves as a way for us to place ourselves in the time frame in the episode, that crack wasn't there in season 1. So either that's just they had this idea and it's like, oh, we wish we could have thought this out, and that's plausible, or this is the type of time travel where like reality alters to like be congruent with whatever happened in the past. You know
That's
what I'm
an interesting
saying?
detail. I wonder if it's a retcon or a genuine intentional detail.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, actually. Hmm. It makes sense though. It makes sense though because remember Obi
Yeah.
didn't know whatever the conversation was, but then as Loki
Until
had
it
the
happened. Yeah.
conversation, it was like getting downloaded as a memory as it was happening.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. And again, back to what you said, I didn't even consider that, but it is weird that like, why is the TVA exempt from this like branching reality theory. Like why didn't Loki just create a branching reality where he did talk to Obi, and in the one he came from, that never happened, so Obi wouldn't have remembered. But no, he did remember.
It,
So
it seems by playing by the established rules in Loki that there should be a version where he didn't talk to Obi or what have you. So it's
right,
maybe it's an unreliable narration in the sense of like it's getting presented to us as it is a singular timeline, but maybe there actually is a bunch of them, a bunch of TVAs or I don't know, but you're right. It is interesting that it doesn't seem to play by that.
and then we're getting into like such crazy speculative territory right now. But if it is that model where like indeed the branches are happening, but we're just not privy to it, then that's another tally point for OB being like some kind of crazy entity that he would remember stuff from other timelines. You know, I don't think that's the case.
Now
I
it's
think I think,
confusing because it's like, wait a second, you're right.
but I think it's. I don't think that's the case, but that would be cool. I think it's more likely what we've been
Yeah.
saying is that for some reason the TVA is like playing by different rules, which I mean would make sense. I mean, they kind of would have to, at least to some level, to be able to do
Yeah.
what they do.
Yeah.
But yeah, all very interesting.
Okay, let's move on to the future scene where
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Sorry. One final thing that I forgot to mention about OB is that, and I could be wrong here. I'm not a big comic guy, so for anybody that is, please correct me. But I feel like I remember talking about this back in season 1. In the comics, He Who Remains was not Kang. It was not Nathaniel Richards. But in season 1, it's like, okay, this makes a lot of sense, and they always make a lot of changes from the comics.
Mhm.
But that made me wonder, like, could OB really be the one He Who Remains, like the true He Who Remains, and Kang just kind of like you started using that identity.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, it would be an interesting like twist uh, with He Who Remains being mentioned so much in that first episode. If it's not even really him, it's actually
yeah,
Obi. We have to stop He Who Remains, and yet here they are talking to Obi. So
yeah, it'd be crazy if
I
he
don't
ended
know.
up being like a bad guy.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
or an unknowing bad guy.
Yeah,
Like I do get the impression that I do get the impression a little bit. It reminds me of The Matrix, where
yeah,
Neo meets the architect, and the architect's like, "This is actually like number 37 or whatever."
yeah,
That's kind of the impression I got of the TVA. Is like now this is the TVA version where there's
yeah.
the triad. What are they called?
The
The
timekeepers.
timekeepers.
Hundred
Now
percent.
this is what they're trying now. Like that one really screwed up before. I'm gonna
Yeah,
try to put myself behind a wall. So you know,
which uh, again, comparing to the Matrix, like I think Neo was like the 6th or 7th or 8th, the
mm,
one, and
right.
it's like there's always an anomaly that always like destroys the
Mm,
system, and then we rebuild it, which could like be very synonymous with the TVA, because like we said at the start of this episode, there was some event in the past that was being crazy that was not Sylvie killing Kang. And we know that some point after that event, everything changed, and it's now the timekeepers instead of Kang. So like, yeah, maybe
mm,
exactly similarly. There's like always, it's like a cycle where like always something happens that blows everything up, and then they have to like make a new version. And all right,
mm.
this time let's try the timekeepers instead of
Yeah,
me being the face.
it's an interesting thought that it's fated to happen in a way, in the sense of it is now happening again. The
Yeah,
timelines are spinning out. I mean,
and Ouroboros, the infinite circle, like
yeah.
always destined to repeat. Maybe
But it's interesting though that he didn't like as power was surging, he wasn't like, "Oh yeah, this happened 800 years ago when the power was surging, when the timelines were sprawling out."
true.
So, I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, that is a good point. All right, yeah.
The
Sorry,
the
continue.
future scene with Sylvie. So we know in the outro that our post-credit scene, Sylvie, which let's maybe pause there for a second, goes to this McDonald's. She's like, "I want it all." And my wife and I were talking about like, what does she mean by this? The impression I got was she was at peace with her decision, in the sense of like she sees like people happy, enjoying themselves, kind of like, yeah, like I made the right call. Like here's people who get to live out their lives, And that also in tandem with maybe her feeling like she could finally, um, find peace herself. What was your take on that
Ba-
post credit scene?
Basically, that as well is because she hasn't had a life. Like her whole life from childhood has been running
Right.
from these people. So like now she's like, I killed the guy. I took care of it. Like let me live. Like I want to try everything. That's how I kind of took it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Um, which I did.
So go
I
ahead.
did see somebody tweet that. Well, two things here. That the post credit scene when it says where she is on the screen, Broxton, Oklahoma. First of all, in the comics, that's where Thor makes New Asgard. Which which
Interesting.
it's not in the MCU movies, at least I don't think. But you know how New Asgard in the movies is
Yeah.
now on Earth. So in the comics,
Right.
Broxton, Oklahoma is where that happened. But then two, on the little title frame, it says branched reality. So
Right.
we know that this is like a separate one, which they could still like not tell us. Like just to cite back to our earlier conversation about like within the TVA, like if any of those were branches, they seemingly would have told us, right?
Right.
Which they didn't ever tell us in season one, like when something was a branch versus a
Right.
whatever. But I thought that was interesting. So I'll be interested to see kind of like the fact that they decided to explicitly say that, like what that's going to mean for the rest of the season.
So what's the implication of why Sylvie shows up in the future end of the TVA, for lack of a better phrase? She shows up, says, there you are, and presumably batons him, I think.
Oh no,
Is
bro. I don't think so at all.
You don't think she's the one who did it?
No, she was like coming out the elevator. He got baton from behind.
Well, I
Like the
mean,
stick like comes out of his chest.
I remember the disintegration thing happening like here, but
Listen, if you're saying that like it was a Sylvie variant that was behind him, maybe, but like it was not the one in the elevator. Like I'm almost certain of that.
well, the phone was ringing to bring him to that spot, so maybe she was luring him there. Okay, so we need to pause for a second because I'm on team. Here's where my mind was going: was that something happened in Oklahoma that made her realize either we've made a mistake or like something needs to be done to prevent like catastrophe. Because she leaves Oklahoma, comes to the future TVA. Um, Presumably, from my point of view, lures Loki to that exact spot so that he can not be lost in time. So he can go back to where he was supposed to, because this is what needs to happen to like save the universe, so to speak.
Okay.
Because we had like the phone ringing and all this stuff. So I was under the impression that Sylvie wanted him to get disintegrated right then and there to make sure he was okay in the past.
Definitely possible. Like, I'm not saying that she couldn't have been part of the plot to make that all happen ultimately. I'm just saying I really am confident that she was not the one to baton him because it seems like it comes from behind because it like comes out of his chest.
Yeah,
So
he
like
does
somebody
arch forward.
behind him batoned him.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that is I am very curious to know. Let's just call that the plot to baton Loki, whatever that may entail. I'm curious if Sylvie was a part of it or not. My initial impression after watching the episode was that she wasn't, and that like she had been trying to find him and finally did, and then escaped from her grasp again. But it is entirely possible that like she was part of like they needed to get him there in that moment, and so she was part of that. I like the idea of the phone drawing him there. I didn't think about that. Because I'm very curious what that phone call was. Um,
Also very Matrix-esque.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I assume it's either what you said as far as her motivations being A, she is part of the plot to make sure he doesn't get lost in time. B, let's just say she's not aware of that for whatever reason. But B, it's just she realizes something and knows they have to fix it, whatever. And so she's looking for him. Or C, it's not necessarily about like fixing anything. It's just that like, hey, like like she loves him, or like 'cause they kind of were like bonding before the big fight at the end. And so maybe she was like, I want to try everything, but like nothing is filling this hole. Like Loki was the one that, And so she's just like, my new mission is just to find him, maybe kind of separate from the grander plot on the whole, if she is aware of it even. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm really curious. It's for my money, it seems like the fact that he got batoned right there had to have been like
Maybe
a
it was
good
him.
thing. Yeah, yeah, like a Loki variant, a Morbius, or it could be even somebody, a person batoning him with good intent is
Mhm.
probably what happened there. But I guess it could also be like a bad intent that they just didn't know that that's like what actually needed to happen in the
Mhm.
moment. But they're like, oh, Loki and Sylvie are about to meet up again. Nope, you know.
Right.
For my money, it's the good, and it seems like that's where you're at as well.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm very curious what Sylvie's motivations are. If they are like, is it love, or is it we got to fix what we did? Maybe it's both.
I feel like it's too I don't know if cliche is the right word. I just don't envision her like living her life in Oklahoma and realizing I miss Loki. Like I need Loki.
You
Like
don't
that
think
that
that would happen, or you do?
I don't. I
Mm,
don't.
okay.
I feel like it's not a like post 2020
Yeah,
or
not in like a not in like
like
a damsel in distress. I need the man, but
no, I know
like,
you weren't saying that either. I just feel like writers today are so much like more like averse to that that
yeah.
I have a hard time envisioning her being like, man, this chicken nugget's really good, but I just miss Loki.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's going to be something she realizes is catastrophic. And it's like, I need to find Loki. Like I made a mistake. I need to find Loki.
I
Um,
I think it'll be both. I think it'll be
yeah.
both probably.
Yeah.
And maybe
She's like,
that's
oh,
even like part of her journey. Like, I don't think she would ever
yeah.
like say that, but then like maybe by the end of season 2, that's kind of like the character arc of her like
Yeah.
becoming vulnerable, because that's kind of like where we
Yeah.
left it at the end of season 1. The Loki we've been following finally is like being
Hmm.
vulnerable. And I don't, it was such a great episode and I haven't watched it in a long time, so I don't remember, but it's like the one that like is always lying versus like, like that was
Hmm.
like the dynamic is like he always lies, but he's like, you can trust me. And she's like,
Hmm.
no, I can't, type of thing. Anyway.
But, but him getting pulled back wasn't like the mechanism like you need to purge yourself from every timeline or something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that was said. Yeah.
So is the implication that he's the only remaining Loki?
I don't know that. I thought that line was weird because when they first said that, I was like, okay, is the whole season going to be about like him tracking down other Lokis and pruning them, including Sylvie? But then since this all got resolved within the episode and we didn't see any other Lokis get pruned, I don't know if that was just like a weird way to write that dialogue, or if there is something there that we don't have a full grasp of yet.
Yeah, okay.
But I did
Because
think
I was
that was
even
weird.
yeah, I was even thinking like the Marvel movies we've seen, is he pruned from those? Like, and then I
Because
was
there's
also
there's
thinking,
infinite Lokis.
yeah, well, and then also thinking about the fact that Sylvie is a Loki variant.
Yeah,
I just kind of thought, I mean, she's still around.
right.
So yeah, the episode ended in kind of a neat and tidy way that was a little bit intellectually dishonest in the sense of like, well, wait, like it seems like everything's good, but like I'm having trouble and I think it's kind of intentionally complicated.
Yeah. Well, I do think that
But
was intentional because it's her POV. Are you talking about the end credit scene?
no, I was just saying like the way they set the stakes was
Mm,
you have to go prune every version of yourself or you're going to be lost to time,
mm.
and yet the mechanism of that happening was there wasn't like a direct line from A to B of like, okay, he did it.
Yeah.
Like if there was like a big button that was like prune all and he pressed it, and then we just saw like quick clips of him just disintegrating in like every different environment, I'd be like, oh, there it is. He did it.
Yeah.
But instead, like him batoning himself or him getting batoned in the future, it's like we're told to presume that means it's done, and yet the mechanism of it is very confusing. And there's
Yeah.
also still a Sylvie.
Yeah. I mean, for my money, that just has to be like a weird script piece of dialogue because I mean, he clearly didn't trim. Like they must have just
Mm,
meant singularly him,
mm,
you know? But they worded it very confusingly. So I mean, I guess
mm.
which you would think they wouldn't do. So like maybe there is another shoe to drop with that. But I was
Yeah.
also thinking, even though the time slipping seemingly got solved, at least the way we were presented it, like that they did what he told them to do, so now it should be done. But I was wondering if that would be like a mechanic for like Loki to affect change in this world, like if he was like singularly capable of maybe
Mm.
not fixing things necessarily, but like enacting change of some sort because he could, like he's like the only
Mm.
one that can travel between the eras of the TVA.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be interested to see if there is still any type of time slipping moving forward. But I get it
Yeah.
doesn't really make sense for there to be, but
Yeah.
it would be interesting.
Mm. What's going on with the general lady and her son, boyfriend?
Yeah, I don't know. That
Who's
was real weird. Which she's the
the
same actress that had the weird relationship with her son in Game of Thrones.
yes, Leanna
I don't remember her name, but probably.
Stark.
Yeah, yeah.
Or not Stark. It's the maiden name. Whatever it is, but
Right, right.
yes, man, they
Yeah,
talk
she's
about
got
being typecast.
typecast. Yeah.
And then B15, is that the woman's name? What's her
I
name?
think so. B15 is the woman.
Yeah, I loved her like look of just like
Yeah, like the side eye.
yeah. Yeah, what's going on there?
I don't know. I don't know. I was kind of everyone like that was weird. And
Mhm.
that especially that like guy soldier X something was his name, I think. Definitely is seemingly being set up to be like a big character this season, or at least a recurring to some extent. Probably antagonistic. So I'm assuming like maybe whatever faction Mobius and Loki are on, as far as like what they think should happen to fix things, is going to be at odds with
Mhm.
what that judge or
Yeah.
whoever, like whatever she ultimately thinks should happen. Um,
What's up with the judge sleeping, by the way?
I when they first walked in, I was like, "Is that guy dead?" I didn't know. I didn't know
There
what
was
to make of
some
that.
weird, intentionally weird energy about that whole session.
Yeah,
I was like,
go ahead.
sorry, I was just thinking like, okay, there's only three of them.
Yeah,
One's asleep. It seems like this is a pretty big discussion, and they
yeah,
don't seem like keen to wake him up. They're just like, cool, I mean, and also we
yeah,
got a great little detail of like everyone's always been guilty. By the way,
yeah,
that was a great line. And then also Loki being in the past of that room, listening to Kang. Was Kang talking to Renslayer? I couldn't hear
yeah,
the dialogue. Okay.
yeah. So
Okay. Cool.
he played it, and it was like, thank you for helping me win this war by my side.
Yeah.
And then he rewound it, and you could hear that he was talking to Renslayer because
Okay.
he says her
Yeah.
name. Yeah, I was wondering like if we do have any like knowledgeable comic readers. I was curious if like that sleeping like if that is like a character from the comics that, like, one of the judges like always sleeping or something, or if there was just more to that, because it did feel like,
Mm.
and I don't want to say weird as in it was like wrong in any way, but it definitely like stood out.
Yeah.
So I was very curious about that. Now, the the tape the tape scene that we were just talking about, I have no like evidence for this, but this is just one of those like storytelling things that I thought of, which I don't know if that makes sense, but like all that to say is there's no like things I can point to in the episode that back this up, but more of like this would be a cool storytelling device if this is what was happening. Um, we know that the whole episode when he time slips, he goes to the past until the end of the episode when he obviously goes to the future and sees Sylvie. I thought like a cool like flip on that would to be like, what if one of those times we thought he was in the past, he was in the future? And the
Yeah.
only time that would be possible is in that room, because every other
Yeah.
time there was like a character that firmly
Yeah.
planted them in the past.
Yeah.
Um, and so the one piece against that would be like, well, the wall was Kang, and
Right.
we know that was in the past. But in the present, Loki destroys that and reveals the
Mhm.
Kangs again.
Right.
So it could be the future. Or
Yeah.
even regardless of the Loki part, it could just be the future where Kang is in power and flaunts it again.
Mhm.
Um, so I just thought that would be cool if that was the case, and this was like the new Kang and Renslayer who have once again taken over, and like that's what the recording was of.
It's a
But
fun show, man.
yeah,
I definitely think like once the show's all said and done, I'm gonna have to like rewatch it from episode 1 of season
yeah,
1 because it just there's so many cool like little nuances and details. And are we getting a season 3, by the way? Is that
I don't
happening
know.
or
That information may be out there. I haven't looked. I
no?
hope
Okay.
so. Like, I don't want like a Showtime situation where they run their show into like the dirt, milking every last penny out of it. But I really hope, because this is the only show that's gotten a second season so far from Marvel. Um, I don't know if it's the only one. Like, they maybe have announced other ones that are getting them by now. I haven't kept up with it, but as long as there's like interesting stories to tell, like I hope they keep this going because like we both mentioned at the start, this is one of our favorite properties they've done. Period.
Yeah.
So I hope it gets a season 3 for sure.
Yeah. Any criticisms from the episode?
I mean, I don't want to just sound like a big old fanboy, but not like nothing that comes to mind. Like I'm sure there are like some things that
Yeah.
we could point out that were, I mean, like that dialogue we were just talking about earlier. I would tend to give them the benefit of the doubt that there's maybe something we just aren't like fully understanding yet. But if not, if that is just kind of like sloppy writing, then that would be one thing because that was like really confusing way to phrase
Mhm.
that. But no, other than that, I mean, nothing really stood out to me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's I think Lost showed us that you can have a lot of unanswered or unclear things and people will still, be
Yeah.
all in.
I mean, it's part
So,
of the fun, because then
yeah.
we get to sit here and like talk about it. And even if you don't,
Yeah.
have a podcast, just talking with your friends about it. Like that's like my favorite thing of consuming stuff like that these days.
Speaking of Lost, I think my only criticism is you remember like the most disliked characters in Lost? I think it's like around season 2 or 3, Nikki and Paolo.
Yeah.
Which by the way, guys, we're talking a lot about Lost. It's just another fun show. But from forever ago, which I have some friends who are watching it for the first
Oh
time.
yeah, yeah.
I
You
think I
told me
told you
that.
that. It's just really they're on into season 2, I think, which is really fun. But um, so the most disliked episode from Lost was it's all these people on an island. The premise of the show, there's a plane crash, they're abandoned on an island, and it's somewhere like in season 2 or 3 where something happens, and these two characters who we've never seen before are like, John, why did this happen? And just like this presumption that they've been there the whole time. And you're like, who are you? Like, when did you get here?
Yeah.
I felt that way with Boy Soldier.
Hmm.
When he showed up to like send Mobius up to the judges council,
Yeah.
where he was like, hey, Mobius. So I heard you like wave runners. Stupid. I was like, who are you? At least I don't think he was in season 1, right? Or was
No,
he?
he wasn't. And I
Yeah,
do
okay.
understand that, but I feel like it's
Totally.
fair because like
No,
the
it's
TVA
fine.
is massive, right? So there's like
Yeah.
presumably like tens of thousands of characters that we just would never see.
Right.
Um but yeah, it definitely did come out of nowhere.
Yeah,
Which
I
I
mean, I give him grace for exactly what you just said. Like, if you're going to introduce a new character, like, there's not really a clean way to do it other than just the presumption that they've always been there.
yeah,
Um, but
I didn't know jet skis were a brand.
I didn't either, actually.
It's crazy. Like, so what are
Yeah.
those things called?
I don't
You
know.
know?
Yeah, that's a great question, though. Yeah, man, it honestly just reminded me of so many great season 1 scenes. I need to just go back and rewatch it.
Yeah,
It was such a great season of television.
it was indeed.
So when does the next episode drop?
I think they drop Wednesday, but I don't know if that's like when like because the episodes drop on Disney Plus, at least for us, like at 2 a.m. that night.
Okay.
So I don't know if Wednesday is like uh, Wednesday anytime you can watch it, or if it Wednesday at 2 a.m., aka Thursday.
Okay.
I think Wednesday though. Like I think Wednesday. So I think Tuesday real late if you stayed up, you could watch it, and then Wednesday you can watch it whenever.
Okay.
Type of
Okay.
thing.
Cool. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, we'll be covering all 6 episodes. If you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button. Follow us along. We got a Discord. You can join us. We do mostly Critical Role D&D type of content, but we try to jump into some of the stuff when we can.
Yeah, I went ahead and made a Loki channel in the Discord so that we could
Great. Okay.
talk about
Cool.
it there. So yeah, I'm assuming I know I've talked to a few of our normal Critical Role folks
Mm.
that are watching this show as well. So
Yeah.
hopefully there'll be some discourse going on. But if you are new to us, definitely join on up and help get that party started for sure. Because as you can
Yeah.
tell, we love this show and we're excited to talk about it.
Yeah. Alrighty. I think that's it.
I think that'll do.
That'll do, donkey. That'll do.
Alrighty, y'all. Till next time.